Good day, everyone, and welcome to another YES program. I'm Pam Rakansky. I'm the YES facilitator, and we welcome you today. We ask that, I already talked to that. Today we are hearing from Matt Margolis, part of Margolis Weldon. He will be talking about understanding Medicaid and how to protect your assets legally. Learning how to strategically protect your assets. This is one of Matt's great best talks of the year, highly attended. So I'm so glad that everyone's on for today. And with that, I would like to welcome elder law attorney Matt Margolis.
Hello. Good morning, everybody. Happy New Year. Thank you, Pam. I'm going to apologize right now for being a little congested. Clearly nothing I can do about it, but I am congested nonetheless. So yes, as Pam said, today is we're going to talk about Medicaid and protecting assets. It's one of my favorite talks. People tend to be interested in how they can protect assets, whether it's for themselves, their spouses, their parents, their siblings, somebody they know or love or care about. Yeah, like Pam said, if you have questions, I think Pam mentioned the chat box. I'm going to keep it open on my end too. If you have a question and you are keen enough to type it out, that would be great. That way I don't need to necessarily stop what I'm talking about, and I'll definitely be looking at the chat box and I will answer the question. Or you can save it to the end. Or if you're showing me your screen, you can politely raise your hand and I will take note of that and just take a pause and answer the question when I finish whatever I'm discussing. So without further ado, let's jump in. So before we can talk about protecting assets, we first need to understand a little bit about how Medicaid works. There are different types of Medicaid. There is sort of two main types of Medicaid that we see out there that we work with to some extent, or that our clients are receiving. One is what we sort of call community Medicaid, okay? And that's the Medicaid where if you're living at home and you are living under the poverty level and you need medical insurance, then you would apply for what we call community Medicaid, all right? That's gonna be more of like your health insurance Medicaid. Then we have what we call long-term care Medicaid. Long-term care Medicaid is what we're going to talk about today. We're not going to talk about community Medicaid today. Long-term care Medicaid is the Medicaid that we look at when we are applying, when we're moving into a nursing home or a supportive living facility. And we're looking to have the state help subsidize our long-term care costs, okay? So you just heard me say two types of places, all right? A skilled nursing facility and a supportive living facility. Those are the two types of places in Illinois where you can have Medicaid help pay for your cost of care. I think most of us are probably more familiar with the idea of a skilled nursing home or a skilled nursing facility. Maybe you had a grandparent in one of those at some point. The skilled nursing facility or the nursing home, we'll just call them nursing homes to make it easy. This is the sort of like the top tier level of care, right? An individual that's moving into a nursing home tends to have a need for assistance with multiple activities of daily living. Whether it's getting dressed, whether it's going to the bathroom, whether it's showering, they can't feed themselves. It is going to be somebody that really needs quite a bit of care. These are places that we see a lot more sort of in our general area. I'm going to presume most people that are attending today live in or around Northbrook, just based on where the YMCA is located. So, you've probably driven past multiple nursing homes, within a 5-mile radius of the YMCA. Supportive living facilities are not as common. They are not as prevalent. They're not as well known. Supportive living facility is very similar in a level of care to assisted living. Okay, so I'm presuming most people have heard of assisted living. Now some people kind of throw out these terms and they interchange them, and somebody's really in a nursing home, but they call it assisted living and so on and so forth. But a supportive living facility is more like assisted living when it comes to the level of care. So that's going to be sort of like a tier down, if you will, from a nursing home. Nursing home, you're going to need help with multiple activities of daily living, whereas assisted living, maybe you only need help with one or two activities of daily living. You know, maybe you need help getting dressed and taking a shower, but you can go to the bathroom on your own, you can feed yourself, etc. So supportive living facilities, which tend to be, there's not a ton on the North Shore, actually. The majority of the supportive living facilities that we're familiar with tend to be more either in the city or northern Lake County and McHenry County. Don't ask me why, that's just where they tend to be. And there are not enough of them. Because there are a lot of folks that really need only that level of care, but unfortunately, they don't have enough money to pay for assisted living. And so we've had clients over the years that have gone into nursing homes just because they didn't have enough money, and all the supportive living facilities were, didn't have any openings, didn't have any vacancies, or they weren't in an area that the individual wanted to be living in because they weren't going to be near family, etc. So, we hope to see more supportive living facilities as time goes on. So those are the two types of places in Illinois that take Medicaid. Okay, skilled nursing facilities, supportive living facilities. The last thing I'll say here is that every single supportive living facility in Illinois takes Medicaid, every single one. If it is under the umbrella, if it is called a supportive living facility, and these are questions, it's not going to be on the name, right? It's not going to be like Forest Oaks supportive living facility, right? But if you're looking at places for yourself or your mom or your dad or somebody you know, and you find out it's a supportive living facility, they take Medicaid. However, when it comes to nursing homes, not every single nursing home takes Medicaid. Some do, some don't. Everyone that takes Medicaid also is happy to accept private dollars. Okay. But obviously there are ones that do not take Medicaid at all. I'm going to say that in our general area, a nursing home that tends to have a pretty nice reputation, but that does not accept Medicaid would be Whitehall in Deerfield, which I'm sure if you guys live in the area, you've probably driven by it a million times, especially if you've gone to Carson's. So Whitehall, great place, no Medicaid. Okay. But then you've got tons of other places around here that do accept Medicaid. There's Elevate Care. There's a couple of those in the area. There's Glenview Terrace on Greenwood in Glenview. I think it's on Greenwood. And then multiple others. Okay. I would say in general, there's probably more nursing homes that take Medicaid in this general area than don't. Okay. All right. So every single supportive living facility takes Medicaid. When it comes to nursing homes, some take Medicaid, some don't. Wonderful. All right. We're all on the same page. Let's talk about how Medicaid works now. Okay. So if I am a single individual applying for Medicaid, then there are some certain rules that apply to me as far as what I can have, what the amount of assets and income, et cetera, that I can have to get on Medicaid. So if I'm single, all right, I am allowed to have $2,000 in total assets when applying for Medicaid. Okay, $2,000 in total assets. That is the total of my checking accounts, my savings accounts, my brokerage accounts, my IRAs, my 401ks, my cash value of my life insurance policies. You name it. If you can turn it into cash, the total of all that cannot exceed $2,000. Okay, $2,000. This also means that I cannot own a house. Okay, so, or I can own a house, but I have to sell it. I have to sell it before I apply for Medicaid or after I apply, and we'll talk about how that works. So $2,000 in total assets. When it comes to my income, I get to keep a whopping $30 a month of my income. Now, this is going to be I'm going to talk really mostly about how Medicaid applies to nursing homes versus supportive living facilities. There's sort of two differences. I'm not going to get into the second one. It's to me something that's more of a detail that's not, I'm going to say, not really relevant for today. But one of the biggest differences between how Medicaid works if I'm moving into a nursing home versus supportive living is the amount of income I can keep. So if I'm moving into a nursing home, I get to keep $30 a month of my income, right? So if I get $1,800 from Social Security, I can pay for my Medicare supplement, which I will keep. Okay. Then I get to keep $30 to put in my pocket, and then the rest of my income goes to the nursing home. Okay. But Medicaid picks up the rest of the tab. Okay. So the state picks up the rest of the tab, right? So not a terrible situation. We wish that the state would allow an individual to keep more than $30 a month. That number hasn't changed in decades. And we obviously know that the cost of living has gone up quite a bit in the last 20 years, let alone probably 30 or 40, I think, since that $30 a month number was kicked in. But nonetheless, I get to keep $30 a month. If I am in a supportive living facility, I get to keep $90 a month of my income. All right, if I'm in supportive living, I get to keep $90 a month of my income. And then the last thing is that there is a 5-year look back period. Okay, and Tim, I see your question. I'll answer in a second, I promise. There's a 5-year look back. What does that mean? That means that when I go to apply for Medicaid, I need to show 5 years worth of bank statements. 5 years of statements for every single account I have: checking, savings, money market, retirement, IRAs, 401ks, life insurance policies. They want to see, basically the state's looking to see, what did I give away, if anything, over the last 5 years? Now, if I spent, $30,000 on a trip to Europe, or if I spent $4,000 on a new, 3D flat screen TV, that's fine. That's fine. But if I wrote a check to my son for $5,000, you better believe the state's going to take issue with that. It doesn't matter if I was doing it to just gift him money to get it out of my name to apply for Medicaid. The state will always take the stance that I was gifting the money for purposes of making myself Medicaid eligible. Even if I was giving the money to my son who was going through a divorce and didn't have enough money to pay the lawyer. Or even if I was giving my daughter $6,000 to help pay for college for my grandkids. Okay, the state doesn't care. If I gave the money away, the default, as far as they're concerned, is that I was doing it to make myself eligible for Medicaid. And here's what happens, all right? If I give anything away in the last 5 years, and it doesn't matter if it was 58 months ago or 3 weeks ago, if I gave money away in the last 5 years, here's what happens. Let's say that I gave away $20,000. Okay, let's say I gave away $20,000. And the nursing home that I'm moving into, just to make it really easy, let's say the nursing home I'm moving into is $10,000 a month. The state would say, Matt, but then let's say that I'm also down to $2,000. So I'm Medicaid eligible, right? So I apply for Medicaid and the state says, Matt, you're approved, but you gave away $20,000. So basically what you did, because this nursing home that you're moving into costs $10,000 a month, you gave away 2 months worth of care. If you did not give away that $20,000, you wouldn't be applying for Medicaid for another 2 months. So guess what? While you're approved for Medicaid, we're going to give you a 2-month penalty. What does that mean? That means that you are going to pay out of pocket for the next 2 months. The state doesn't care how you pay for it, but you're going to have to pay for the next 2 months because the state, let's just say that the 2 months starts January 1st. I've got to pay for January and February. Basically, the state is saying, we'll start paying for you in March. We'll start paying the nursing home in March. And frankly, we don't care how you pay for the nursing home the next 2 months. We just won't start paying for you until March. So what happens in those situations? Well, You know, did I give money away to somebody that I can get it back from? Right? Did I truly give the money away just to try to protect it from Medicaid? Not very smart, you know, not in a very smart way, but did I just try to give it away to protect it from Medicaid? If so, maybe my son or daughter or grandchild can give me the money back and I can use it to pay for those 2 months. In some cases, I can't get it back. Right? Maybe I truly gave it away to somebody that needed it and it's gone. Well, I don't, the best answer I can give you here is that in a situation like this, I have to work it out with the nursing home to see if I can work out some deal with them where they will let me stay there for the next 2 months. And I'll pay them whatever I can, but I can't pay them the full amount. Other than that, I don't have a good answer for you. It's a rock and a hard place for people. Okay. So there's 2 questions. One, which is a little more related to what I just talked about. So what if the money was given away, you know, on a romantic scam? Great question, Paul. You know, we see a lot of those nowadays, not a lot, but more than we'd like, right? Where, you know, maybe an older individual is being, you know, scammed by a younger, you know, person. In those types of situations, the state, I'm not saying that it's going to work, but, you know, we've had situations where adult children have taken money from their parents. Okay, so I'm going to kind of allude this to the same type of thing, right? Something, you know, mischievous was done. So we've had situations where adult children took advantage of their parents, took their money. And we've told the clients, you need to file a police report. If you file a police report, then the state will very likely, can't promise they will, but the state's going to be more likely to do away with the penalty if you say that your son stole the money. He was your power of attorney. He had access to your bank account. He took the money. I bet you guys would, you know, understand this. Most clients are not very willing to file a police report against their kids. Right? So those situations are tough ones. The romantic scam, it's hard because, you know, I don't have a great answer for you, Paul. It's one of those things where we're going to do what we can, you know, ideally, you know, a lawyer's involved in helping with the situation. And, you know, we're getting affidavits signed by family members saying that, you know, this individual's cognitive ability was compromised. They were taken advantage of. You know, if we can support it with doctor's letters that, you know, they didn't have, they had, you know, diminished capacity, et cetera, et cetera. Those are situations where we do what we can to try to fix that, if you will, with the romantic scam. But, you know, there would be a lot involved to try to work that one out, to be honest. And again, these are situations where we would always tell clients, we can't guarantee that what we're going to do is going to fix the problem. We can give it our best effort. In a lot of cases, you know, we can at least soften the blow, but in some of these situations, there may not be a solution. So Marcia's question, if I gift money to the child, can they use it to pay my expenses? Yes, but we're going to talk about something else, Marcia. I'm hoping to answer that question a little bit later. Okay. So yes, we can gift money, and that's something we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about how to gift money in a smart way, not just like, oh, I'm going to gift money to my kids and then I'm going to apply for Medicaid because I'm smarter than the system. Okay. So I hope to answer that question, Marcia. And if I don't, then you can maybe reformulate that question a little bit later with me. Tim, to get back to your question, we're going to talk about that. Is there anything exempt from the $2,000 cap? You know, money in a trust. So yes, we will discuss that later. What I can tell you right now, and I will go into this in more detail later, the most common type of trust out there, if any of you guys have done any estate planning, or you have relatives that have done any estate planning, the most common type of trust out there is what we call a revocable living trust. Revocable living trust. Revocable living trust. Keep on saying it. A revocable living trust does not protect assets. It's a great planning device. Listen, we draft, I don't know, hundreds of them over the course of a year. Revocable trusts are great at protecting my estate or an estate from going through probate when we die. Okay, they're great at making sure that things are set up to ensure that we have an easier administration of our estate at our passing. But from an asset protection standpoint, from protecting our assets from Medicaid, assets in a revocable trust are not protected. They are looked at no differently than if they are in my a checking account that's in my name individually. So that's sort of my quick answer, Tim, but I'll go into a little more detail, just like for Marcia. Both of your questions are sort of tied together, and I will answer them together, I promise. So that's sort of how the 5-year look back works, guys. Okay. Now, when we look at a married couple, okay, the assets that we're able to keep as a married couple are a little bit different than as a single individual. As a single individual, I think it was pretty clear I don't get to keep a lot, right? $2,000 in total assets, $30 a month of my income if I'm in a nursing home, $90 a month of my income if I'm in a supported living facility. If I'm married, those numbers I just gave you for me stay the same. The $2,000 in assets in my name only, and the $30 a month of income. Now my spouse, and these numbers just went up January 1. I've been doing this now for, in March, it'll be 11 years that I've been doing this. And this is the first time these numbers have gone up in 11 years. My spouse can have $3,435 a month of income. $3,435 a month of income, $3,435. Prior to this year, that number was $2,739. So it went up $700. It went up about 25%, which is huge, a little over 25% actually. So that was a big change, right? Because now my spouse can keep $3,435 a month of income. And I'll talk about that in a second. I'll go into a little more detail. My spouse is also allowed to have $112,299 of assets in his or her name. $112,299. This number also went up, not by a ton, not even close to as great of a percentage as the income. This number was 109,560 for I want to say at least the last 6 or 7 or 8 years. It might be the last 10 or 11 years. So that number went up 2.5%. And it's going to continue to go up 2.5% for the next number of years until I think it reaches like the federal amount, which I don't know, but for our sake, for now, it doesn't even matter. Okay. So 112,299. So my spouse can have $112,299 in assets in her name. Plus she can have a house. Plus she can have a car. Now, let me go back to the single individual example. The one thing I didn't mention is that if I'm a single individual, I'm limited to $2,000 of assets. If I own a home, I can still apply for Medicaid, but the state's going to require me to sell the house. I can't just like keep the house in my name. So the state's going to require me to make an effort to sell the house. And then guess what? When the house sells, and now all of a sudden I've got $300,000 in my name, I get temporarily kicked off Medicaid. I have to spend all that money down at the nursing home. And then once I'm back under $2,000, then I can get back on Medicaid. But if I'm married, the house is protected. Okay. The house would have to be transferred to my spouse's name only. My name cannot stay in the house. But the house is protected. My wife gets to keep it. And there's no limit on the value of the house. Medicaid doesn't care if it's a $250,000 house or $1 million home. And then the car. Okay, my wife gets to keep a car. I've got some clients that have, so to give you some examples here, I've had clients over the years where, they're like, oh, my mom really needs a new car. Her car is 20 years old. And so I'll say, okay, well, this is a good time to buy a new car. She gets to keep a car, and your parents have, $250,000, and your mom is only going to get to keep 112 of that, roughly. So she should buy a new car. I'm like, but she probably shouldn't go buy like $100,000 Mercedes, right? That's not necessarily a good investment. People always think by spending a lot of money in a car, they're protecting more money. Not really, right? Because that $100,000 car she just bought in a year is going to be worth $80,000. Okay. But there's been situations where, yeah, it makes sense. Buy a new car. I've had other situations where, let's say that clients come to me and they've got, this is kind of I'll give you the non-wild example first. They've got a house that's worth $400,000, then they got a $100,000 mortgage on it. But they've got $400,000 in the bank. And we know that if we apply for Medicaid for one of the spouses, the other spouse gets to keep $112,000. And if they've got $400,000, that means, $288,000 is quote unquote at risk, meaning it's going to have to get spent before they can apply for Medicaid. So what we've done in those situations is we've advised them, pay off that $100,000 mortgage right now. The spouse gets to keep the house. It's a protected asset. Shove that $100,000 in towards the mortgage, pay off the house. Now, not only are you decreasing the monthly expenses for that spouse that's at home, but you're also immediately protecting $100,000. And it's not a gift. You're not gifting it away to anybody. A more wild example is I've had clients come to me where they were renting an apartment and they had $600,000 in the bank. And one of the spouses was applying for Medicaid. What did I advise? I advised that they buy a house. I advised the spouse to buy a house because she bought a $400,000 house and immediately protected $400,000 of their assets. Because again, Medicaid allows her to have a house. Now, again, some of these things that I'm talking about only work in situations where there's a spouse. Okay, our options sometimes of protecting assets and planning are a little greater sometimes when we're married. Not always, but in some of these situations. There's also situations where maybe the mortgage is paid off, they already own a house, but maybe they want to have some work done on the house. They've been, thinking about it for the last 2, 3, 4 years. Now's the time to do the work to the house. Spend the $50,000 on redoing the kitchen today. Right? Do it, spend that money before we apply for Medicaid. It's protected. Okay, nothing wrong with that. Again, you're not giving it away. Let's talk about the income. Okay, so let's say that in this example, I'm moving into the nursing home. My wife's at home. Let's say that my income from Social Security is $2,100 and my wife's income from Social Security is $1,400. So if I was not married, my $2,100 from Social Security would allow me to keep $30 a month. I could continue to pay for my Medicare supplement. Okay. And then I would have to give the rest to the nursing home. But in this example, because I'm married and my wife's income is only $1,500, I can transfer my excess income that I would otherwise give to the nursing home if I was single to my wife to get her up to that 34-35 number that she's allowed to have. So in some cases with a married couple, so in that example, I wouldn't be giving any of my income to the nursing home because our combined income is less than 34-35. Now, if it was more, let's say my wife's income was $2,000 a month and mine was $2,300 a month. I can only transfer to her to get her up to 34-35. I can't put her over that number. So if she had $2,000 a month of income, if I had $2,300, again, I get to keep my $30 a month for just because I get to keep the $30 a month per Medicaid terms rules. I get to pay for my Medicare supplement, which I want to keep in place. And I'll talk about that in a second. And then I can give my wife, an amount of money to get her up to that 34-35. And then whatever I have left after all those three, I have to give that to the nursing home, which might be a couple $100. Really quick, I probably should have brought this up at the beginning, so I started to be a little bit out of order here. And while this is not totally relevant to the talk, I think it's relevant enough and it comes up enough where I think it's important to talk about before we get into the asset protection conversation. I want to make sure everybody understands that there is a big difference between Medicare and Medicaid. Medicare is health insurance that we get at age 65. Medicaid is something that we apply for to pay for our long-term care costs in a nursing home or supported living facility if we meet certain asset requirements. Okay. Medicare provides a very, very limited benefit I'm going to say long-term care. It's really for short-term care, but for long-term care in a nursing home. So if I go to the hospital and I'm there for 3 overnights inpatient status. So I don't care if I'm in the hospital for 8 days, as long as 3 of those days I'm classified as inpatient, or 3 nights I'm classified as inpatient and not observation. I need 3 nights classified as inpatient status in a hospital. If I am then discharged to rehab, and typically rehab is at a skilled nursing facility, right? Glenview Terrace, Whitehall, okay, etc. If I'm discharged to a skilled nursing facility for rehab, Medicare, again, I need those 3 overnights inpatient status. I'm discharged to Whitehall, let's say for rehab, Medicare will cover the first 20 days at 100%. They'll cover the first 20 days of my rehab at 100%. For the remainder, for up to the next 80 days, okay, so for a total of maybe up to 100, but for the next 80 days, Medicare will cover 80%. And if I have a Medicare supplement, my Medicare supplement will pick up the other 20%. So I could potentially not be out of pocket for up to 100 days of rehab. Now I can tell you that it's very rare to get 100 days of rehabs. A lot of people don't need necessarily 100 days. Let's say they get like a hip replacement, they go to rehab after, etc. They may not need a total of 100 days. But some clients, what we see a lot of, unfortunately, is somebody, is on day 37 of rehab. The facility has a meeting, a care meeting, and they determine this individual has, and the term that they'll use has plateaued. They're not making any more progress. They're not able to take advantage of the rehab anymore. Right? They're too weak. They're not willing to try to walk. They're not willing to use a walker. They're not willing to really make any effort, or they just can't. And so typically what they'll do is they'll meet with the family and they'll say, listen, Medicare only covers rehab if somebody is trying to make progress. Somebody's not making progress and they've plateaued, Medicare is going to stop paying for them. So they may only get 37 days covered by Medicare. And then a lot of times they'll say, listen, your husband or wife or mom or dad, they can stay here. Let's say it's Whitehall. They can stay here, but it's $330 a day. And that's how much it is to stay here. Or it's Glenview Terrace. And they're like, listen, it's $330 a day. And when they run out, then we can apply for Medicaid. So a couple things here that I want you guys to take away. One is, if you have a loved one in the hospital and they're there for multiple nights, you need to be checking in with the social worker or somebody on staff to see how they're being classified. Are they inpatient or are they observation? It makes a huge difference, because if they are discharged and they do not have 3 nights of 3 nights classified as inpatient status and they go to rehab can be $500 to $700 a day. I've had clients call me where their dad was in rehab for a month and they were given a $21,000 bill. And they were like, we thought Medicare paid for this. And then they went back to the hospital records and they see that their dad or mom did not have 3 nights of inpatient status. Okay, so these are situations where you need to be gosh, I can't think of the word. You need to be an advocate. Okay, you need to be an advocate for your loved ones. And in some of these situations, there are patient advocates out there that you can hire that are familiar with the healthcare process. A lot of them sometimes they have nursing backgrounds, they understand the medical records, because they might be able to go in there with you and say, listen, this is BS. They should not be under observation. This should be inpatient status based on what you're doing for them. And so sometimes with somebody on your side, you can get them to change that. But to have them retroactively change that is going to be tough. So stay on top of that. Okay, just something to be aware of. I had one other thing that I was going to say. Oh, additionally, when I say that a Medicare supplement will cover the additional 20% for those remaining 80 days, the first 20 days, Medicare covers 100%. And then another for the next 80 days or up to 80 days, Medicare covers 80% and the Medicare supplement covers 20%. A true Medicare supplement will cover that 20%. Medicare Advantage plans are different. You have to talk to the broker you worked with or the company that you have your Medicare Advantage plan through or whatever it is. You've got to understand what your situation is going to look like. Because with a lot of Advantage plans, there is going to be a period of time where you are going to be out of pocket for that 20%. Okay. So just something to be aware of. All right, let's talk about asset protection. So there are two ways that we can protect assets. Okay. One is from a proactive standpoint. One is more of a crisis situation. All right. And while we all love to be proactive, most of us end up in crisis. Just how it is. So from a proactive standpoint, what do we do to protect assets, right? Well, we talked about this 5-year look back period, right? We know now that if we are going to apply for Medicaid, Medicaid is going to say, Matt, I want to see 5 years, the last 5 years of all your bank statements. And just to be clear, they want to see my wife's as well. They're not just interested in mine. Now, a lot of married couples have joint accounts, but they're going to ask for all the accounts that are in my wife's name only as well. Okay. So because we know they're going to go back 5 years, how can we be proactive? Well, we can look at this and say, maybe I want to get ahead of this. Now, number one, I'll say that looking into long-term care insurance is a wonderful idea. I don't sell it. We're not insurance licensed. I'm not going to go into any more detail than the idea that looking into long-term care insurance makes sense. Great. I can tell you that I've been doing this long enough to tell you that easily less than 10% of the people I meet with have long-term care insurance. So comes the option that I'm going to discuss. So we talked briefly about a revocable living trust earlier, right? This is the most common type of trust out there, but it does not protect assets from Medicaid, right? Great at protecting assets from probate. We draft tons of them on an annual basis. They are fantastic. I have one. I recommend them to most people, but that's not going to protect assets from Medicaid. Let's understand a revocable trust really quickly. Then we'll talk about what the type of trust that we use to proactively plan. Key aspects of a revocable trust. I am the trust maker of my revocable trust. I'm the one creating it. It's my checking accounts and savings accounts and house and assets that are going to get retitled to the trust. I'm also the trustee, meaning now that my bank accounts are in the trust and my house is in the trust, I can do whatever I want with them, just like I did before I had a trust in place. The trust operates off my social security number. Literally, my life does not change at all. All I'm doing is setting things up so that my kids have an easier time when I die. Okay. The trust is for my benefit during my lifetime. A revocable trust is for me. And then when I'm gone and I'm dead, everything goes to my kids or whoever I want it to go to. Okay, great. Now you all are experts on revocable living trusts. Now let's look at the type of trust that we use to protect assets from Medicaid. This is an irrevocable trust. Okay, put an IR before revocable. Irrevocable. An irrevocable trust is what we use to protect assets from Medicaid. But there are big differences between how this works. I mean, they are small, but they are big between how this works and an irrevocable trust. I'm still the trust maker. I'm still creating the trust. I still get to decide what the terms of the trust are. It's still going to be my stuff or some of my stuff that's going to go in the trust. But I cannot be the trustee. I cannot be in control of the trust. I cannot be in control of the assets. So in most cases, when we draft these, the adult children are the trustees. And I'm going to say probably 98% of the time that's the case. Maybe 95, the other 5%, maybe it's like a very close niece or nephew. For clients of mine that don't have adult children, that don't have any nieces or nephews or anybody close to them that they trust, this is just not going to be an option, unfortunately. You are naming somebody and putting them in charge of your money. Likewise, I am not the beneficiary of this trust during my lifetime. On its face, this trust looks like it's for the benefit of my kids during my lifetime. It's a big deal. This is why this trust does not work for everybody. Because let's step back and think about this, right? Okay, so I'm creating a trust. Then I'm putting, let's just use this example. Let's say I've got a son and a daughter, which I do. Let's say my daughter's the trustee. So she's in charge of all the assets in the trust. And my son and my daughter are the lifetime beneficiaries of the trust. All right, they're also the beneficiaries after I die. Great. They would be of any trust I create. But they are the lifetime beneficiaries of the trust, because for me to claim to Medicaid that these assets are protected, the trust can't be for my benefit. It has to look like I gave these assets away. So there is a lot of, no pun involved, trust here, right? Because I have now created a trust where my daughter is the trustee. She is in charge of the assets, and the trust says that it's for the benefit of her and my son. What does that mean? That means that if my daughter wrote a check to herself for $50,000 for the trust, from the trust, she wouldn't be doing anything wrong. She wouldn't be doing anything the trust doesn't allow. That's why we're very careful. And again, we have to use we have to kind of use the smell test in our office, but that's why we're very careful of situations where we put these trusts together. Now, most clients are going to be pretty upfront about, people that they trust, etc. But this is where clients come to us and they don't have kids, they don't have any close family. This trust just won't work. We're not going to name some, person that they're kind of friends with as a trustee and beneficiary. Yes, we could do it. Some cases the clients have wanted to do it. We've just been unwilling to do it. Said, you got to go to another attorney. Doesn't feel good to me. I get that you want to protect the assets. I'm concerned that this person might take the assets from you. So we put the money in this trust, okay? And so, Tim, to kind of answer your question, this is where we can have assets exempt from the $2,000 or $2,000 plus the $112,299 if I'm married example. This is the type of trust we use. But a couple things. We have to put the money in the trust more than 5 years before we think we're going to be applying for Medicaid. Yeah, so Barbara, if you do it within the 5-year period, it's a gift. And we'll talk about how we protect assets in less than 5 years. So right now we're talking about how we protect them in more than 5 years. And this is what we do. Now, we don't have a crystal ball, right? So if clients come to me and their health is already failing, and they're already not doing well, and they're already spending money on a caregiver, or they're in a nursing home, or they're in assisted living, unless they've got tons of money where we can set some aside and keep enough in their name that they can use over the next 5 years. Again, that's the situations where this planning makes sense. There are going to be sort of better times to do it, right? So we've got clients that come to us in their 60s or 70s. They're otherwise pretty healthy. The idea of moving into a nursing home or needing care is not even on the horizon, but they're concerned that, if they need care, they want to protect it. Great. And then, of course, there's situations where we do it and we're like, clients are like, we might make it 5 years, we might not. We're willing to roll the dice. Fine. I'm going to be brief about this because I want to get into the crisis plan. What if I do this planning and I either make it past the 5 years, but my wife and I don't need to go into a nursing home yet, or we do this planning and within 5 years we did not keep enough money outside of this trust? Because in these cases where we set up this trust, we don't put all of our assets in here. We typically put some of them, right? The idea is, listen, worst case scenario, we know we're going to spend money over the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. But worst case scenario, we end up in a nursing home, we want to protect this. Some cases I've got clients, they put $100,000 in there, or their house is paid off, they put their house in there. Because while the house is a protected asset, if one of them needs Medicaid, a house is not a protected asset if they both need Medicaid, or if one of them pass away and the survivor needs Medicaid. Okay. But in some cases, the clients that we set these trusts up for will end up needing to access money from the trust. And so the way that we do that is, in my example, where my daughter's the trustee and my son and daughter are the lifetime beneficiaries. Let's say my wife and I need money at some point. We go to our daughter, And what our daughter does is she writes a check from the trust to herself or to our son for $10,000. They deposit it in their personal bank account, and then they turn around and they write us a check from their personal bank account for $10,000. And they say, Mom and Dad, I love you so much. Here's $10,000. But they're really just giving us our own money. And there's nothing wrong with that. Last thing here, and then I'm going to go to the crisis plan because I want to make sure we've got enough time. From a tax standpoint, because maybe somebody here is interested in trying to figure out, is there any gifting issues here? So the distribution from a trust to my daughter or son in this example, there's no taxes. Okay, a distribution from a trust is not income, it's not taxable. No issues there. But when my daughter turns around and gives me and writes me a check from her personal bank account, or my son writes us a check from his personal bank account, that's a gift. But we each have the ability to gift everybody in the world. I think it's $16,000 a year. I don't know if it just went up this year. I haven't checked yet. I'm sorry about that. But up through last year, we could gift $16,000 a year to everybody and anybody we know. And it doesn't come off of our lifetime exemption. And it doesn't come off, and we don't have to file anything with the IRS. That means that my son, or our son, each year could give $16,000 to me, $16,000 to my wife. Our daughter can give $16,000 to me, $16,000 to my wife. So if you have two kids and there's two spouses, you can effectively get $64,000 back to you without having to deal with the IRS or have any gift tax implications. All right, crisis plan, right? So to get to Barbara's question about less than 5 years. Well, this is what we see a lot of, right? And I get it. People just don't plan. It's not that they don't plan. I don't think people are just really thinking necessarily a lot about, what if I need to go into a nursing home at some point? How can I protect my assets? Some people are. There's a number of people on this call today. That's wonderful. But a lot of people aren't. So the $16,000 is not taxable to the recipient. So let's look at a crisis plan, right? So the crisis plan is where, a couple walks into our office, and typically, thank you, Paul, $17,000 starting this year. Appreciate it. There we go. I'm going to put it in my notes. All right. So we're all learning things today. So here's what happens, right? The wife walks into our office, right? I'm not going to say it's the couple. The wife walks into our office, normally with an adult child for support. And she sits down and she tells us, my husband's in a nursing home for rehab. And the nursing home just had a meeting with us, and he's been there for 37 days, and they just decided that he's plateaued. Medicare has been covering his stay there. We haven't had any out of pocket, but they said after the next 5 days, they said Medicare is going to cover the next 5 days. After that, if he stays there, it's $350 a day. Let's just say it's $10,000 a month to make it easy. It's $10,000 a month. And the wife is concerned, right? Because that's a lot of money to spend on a monthly basis, right? Most older individuals, for the most part, are kind of living within their income, right? They've got $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 total coming in each month from Social Security and some pensions. A lot of times their houses are paid off, even if they're not. They've got minimal mortgages. They don't have a ton of crazy expenses. They're not even really dipping into their savings, let alone now having to spend $10,000 a month on top of their normal monthly expenses. So the wife says, Matt, what can we do? I'm concerned. Of course, I want to make sure my husband's taken care of, but I can't help but be concerned about my own situation because I'm 80 years old. I'm very healthy. I could live another 10, 15 years. And we've got $300,000 in the bank. I can't spend all this on his care. I have to be concerned about myself as well. What can we do? So here's what we do. I'm going to be as quick as I can here. So they've got $300,000. Let's say she's got a house and a car as well. And we're going to say the house is paid off. We're going to make this one a little bit easier. Not going to get too crazy here. Okay. And let's not be too concerned about their income. Okay. Let's just figure they get to keep most of their income. They have to turn over some of the income. That's not the big deal. The big deal here is that they've got $300,000. And if she does nothing at all, we know that she gets to keep 112 roughly, right? It's 112, $299. He gets to keep 2,000. Between the two of them, they get to keep roughly 114,000. For sake of math, let's just call it 100,000. Let's make it really easy. They get to keep $100,000. So after we talk, she realizes, wow, if I don't do anything at all, I'm gonna have to spend about $200,000, both on his care and my regular expenses. And then once I get down to 100,000, then we can apply for Medicaid. But that's gonna leave me with $100,000. Is there something I can do to protect more than that? Well, there is, right? And so what we do is we set up that irrevocable trust. Okay, we set up that irrevocable trust, right? And the daughter's the trustee, and the daughter and the son are the beneficiaries, yada, yada, yada. We don't need to go into those details. We set up that irrevocable trust. And there's $200,000 that we're going to just say is at risk. We're going to take roughly $100,000 of that, and we're going to gift it to the trust. Now we're doing this, a week, 2 weeks, a month before we apply for Medicaid. We're doing this on the doorsteps of applying for Medicaid. So we know, right? We know that $100,000 gift to the trust is going to create a penalty. We know it. And because the nursing home costs $10,000 a month, we know it's going to create a 10-month penalty. But we still have another $100,000 that we have to do something with, right? Because we had 300, we get to keep 100. I know it's 114. We're just calling it 100. We get to keep 100. We gave away 100 to the trust. There's still another $100,000 that we have to get rid of so that we can apply for Medicaid. So that other $100,000 goes into what we call a single premium immediate annuity. We call it a SPIA for short. Now, my quick disclaimer, I mentioned this earlier, my partner and I, our firm, we are not insurance licensed. We don't sell products. We don't get any commissions from any of these insurance products, nothing. There is zero benefit to us from our clients putting money into these annuities. I say that because I have a lot of older clients that come to me where they worked with a quote unquote financial advisor who put their money in annuities, and these annuities can't be touched for 10 years without a surrender penalty. And, it's just done when they're 80 years old. So, we see tons of really bad annuities being sold to seniors out there. It's awful. This is not that. This serves a very specific purpose. And I'm very sorry for all the sniffling, guys. I really am. I felt like it was a little better than blowing my nose constantly throughout this talk. So this other $100,000 goes into this annuity. Okay. Now this is not a gift. This annuity is in the husband's name, let's say. Okay. It's in the husband's name. This annuity. So once we put the $100,000 in the annuity, okay, now that $100,000 is gone. There's $100,000 in the trust, and the wife now has $100,000 in her name, plus her house, plus her car. So now we apply for Medicaid. Medicaid says this gentleman's going to have a 10-month penalty. We say that's great, perfect. We plan for it. What's going to happen? That annuity is going to make 10 equal monthly payments to the gentleman that's in the nursing home. Okay. He's going to use those monthly payments coupled with some of his income and the wife's income to pay the nursing home each month for those 10 months to pay for the penalty. He's going to pay out of pocket for those 10 months. After month 10, the annuity's done. There's no more money left in it. And now, whether the Medicaid application has been approved or not, because it can take a year, it can take 18 months to get a Medicaid application approved. It can take a while. They've been getting approved a lot quicker. We're still kind of in crazy enough. We're still kind of in in COVID mode with the state. So applications are getting approved sooner. But even if whether the Medicaid application has been approved or not, the gentleman, the individual, the client in this case would be considered Medicaid pending after those 10 months. What does that mean? That means that the only amount of money that he would have to pay the nursing home moving forward is if there's some portion of his income he would have to turn over based on what his income was and his wife's income was, and remember the fact that he gets to keep $30 a month of his income and she gets to keep $3,435 a month. So if their combined income was less than $34,35, he doesn't give anything to the nursing home after month 10. The wife gets to keep it all. If their income combined is more than $34,35, then there's a certain portion that would have to be turned over to the nursing home every month thereafter. But Medicaid would be picking up the rest of the tab, the majority of the tab. And in this example, the wife, with no help from us, she would have gotten to keep the $112,299, the house and the car. But with our help, with some planning at the last minute, we were able to protect and shield an additional $100,000. That does not have to be spent for her husband's care. All right, guys, that was a lot. 10:13. I know we've got 2 minutes here, so I will open it up for a couple questions.
Any other questions? I know he's been paying attention to the chat box. Like
What
a good
what
lawyer.
I have a question. What is this aspect about putting money aside for burial expenses? Is that part of the?
Yeah, look at that. Paul just typed the same question.
Okay,
He was typing as you were talking. So yes, you
I
can
beat
pay.
him to it.
Yeah, I didn't mention that. So as when I was talking about the idea that, I've got clients that will like buy a new car, do work on their house. That would sort of be the other thing that we recommend to most clients. Sometimes I feel like I forget it a lot in these talks. Yeah, we typically recommend to clients to prepay their burial. Okay, we do that before we apply for Medicaid. It's an exempt expense, so we can prepay, burial, cremation, whatever they want to take care of. We can prepay all those costs ahead of time, and we would do that pre-application. And that just makes sense. Listen, I don't care if you're applying for Medicaid or not. Prepaying final expenses for everybody makes sense because those are expenses that will only go up over time, and you can lock those costs in now. Now, sometimes it takes a certain individual that's comfortable prepaying for their, last party, if you will. Some people are just very uncomfortable with it, but it definitely makes sense because it is one of those things that will only go up with time, and you can lock in those costs. So yeah, good question, Barbara and Paul.
Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to wrap up. Matt's next talk will be Wednesday, March 1st, same time, 9:15. It is on estate planning. So kind of continuing a little bit of the talk, some questions here. So we're looking forward to that. Our next talk for YES is Tuesday, January 31st, where we talk about osteoarthritis versus osteoporosis. I don't even know if I said that right, but psoriasis sounds fun. Anyway, probably not fun though. Anyway, so hopefully we'll see you in March 1st for estate planning with Matt. And otherwise, please check out our other events. And thank you so much for coming on today. Thank you, Matt, so much. I keep learning more and more, even though some words I think I can say your words.
That's great.
So,
you can take my place next month.
No. Well, thank you again.
Thank you. Thanks for everybody for your good questions. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. See you in March.
See you in March. Bye, guys.
Bye.